The Executive will meet tomorrow to start thrashing out the budget proposals that will go to the Assembly, and the Finance Minister says the sooner the better. So what are the prospects of a united front at Stormont? Mitchell McLaughlin, Sinn Féin are talking about being up for fighting these unacceptable cuts. Would that go up to and including not preparing a budget?
Oh, we, as you know, have a set of proposals already before the parties, and we're looking forward to hearing the ideas of others. So our approach basically is to make it clear that the approach of the British government is unacceptable. They are reneging on commitments that underpin the peace process and the political process. But we've also put proposals to generate revenue for the executive. We've also put proposals to drive out further efficiencies. Now, I think that's an agenda that the parties can, should and must come together on, and I'm looking forward to...
But it's not really fighting, is it? I mean, fighting,
of course
one has images of being on the streets and saying, no, we're not going to carry this out.
No, I'm sorry, of course it is. Because if we aren't in a position to say, these are the measures that we are prepared to take and the pain that we are prepared to take to address this issue, then we're going to get very short shrift indeed when it comes to taking on the British government in terms of their draconian approach. They are going to drive thousands of people out of employment, and where the kind of economic sense of that is escapes me. So I do think that there's a lot of common purpose and reasons for the parties to begin to pull their ideas and to act together in addressing this issue.
Simon Hamilton, Peter Robinson, your party leader, said that there was a lot to talk about in the Sinn Féin proposals. Is that where the future lies in the weeks ahead?
Well, certainly I'm glad that now parties are actually starting to come around to reality that we do need to start discussing these issues. We do need to have a mature discussion about where we go from here, because what has been put before us is an absolute disaster. What it will do is will stunt 4 billion of cuts, will stunt economic growth, it will attack the vulnerable, and it will cripple our construction industry. And you know, I heard it described as a remarkable deal by the Secretary of State. It is remarkable for a British Secretary of State for Northern Ireland to say that this is remarkable. What is remarkable is it is remarkably bad.
No worse than any other region of the United Kingdom, of course.
But of course, in contradiction to the promises made by the government, the same Secretary of State who sat in this studio last week and promised that our capital budget would be protected.
By 2017, he said you would have received, or we would have received the 18 billion promise.
The construction industry will be crippled in the meantime. You know, and maybe he's quite happy with that. I heard him chuckling and laughing along with colleagues as the Chancellor cut away at our budget by 4 billion yesterday. You know, I think it's remarkable that any Secretary of State would say such a thing, never mind claim that it was a great day for Northern Ireland. I find it remarkable that anybody would have wanted to traipse around Northern Ireland earlier in this year with that same Secretary of State actually asking for people to vote for the same Conservative Party to go over
that was then and now is now,
these
of
cuts.
course.
That's remarkable.
Dolores Kelly, your party leader's in Dublin today, and she's talking about looking at developing the cross-border aspect of rationalising services. Do you think that's going to go down well with Unionist colleagues on the executive?
Well, the SDLP published some 18 months ago, and I think the Ulster Unionist Party came out shortly thereafter with some ideas in terms of how we might best make use of all the public money that we had. And I think people have to be pragmatic and realistic. There's no sacred cows in any of this. I think we have to put all our brains and minds together and indeed invite others right across the spectrum and have some form of partnership in terms of looking at what's coming down the track. The SDLP is very committed to protecting the most vulnerable and the most marginalised in our society, and I think that's what we all must collectively do, and that's what the people want. That's what the people are telling the SDLP out on the street today.
David McNary, you've spoken about hollow grandstanding and people being in deficit denial. Do you think that those days have now gone and that everyone can start to pull together?
I don't think there's a choice. I think they have to. I think it's very, very clear that we can do what, you know, the opening bit of the show's been about giving off about this and giving off about that. Well, we've got to realise what are the choices for us. We have responsibilities. We have an executive. That executive is meeting tomorrow. It's going to have to come to terms with the situation. Now, it is devastating. It's tough. It's hard. I can't understand why people are saying this as if it wasn't expected. What came was what was expected.
As the Finance Minister himself said.
Yeah, some people are saying, well, it's worse than was expected, and others are saying it's not as bad.
And your own party leader said it wasn't that bad, really.
What we have is what we've got to deal with. Now, I think we've got to show leadership. We've got to say to people, what we're going into is hard. We know where we are today. Now let's plan for where we're going to be next year, the year after, and see how that's going to have an effect on our economy. If we can stimulate the economy, then the toughness of those cuts will reduce, and we've got to do that. That's the message we've got to give as politicians, and we've got between now and May to get our act together, because come May, the electorate might not want to know us.
You've spoken, Stephen Farry, for the Alliance Party about the tough choices ahead. Things like water charges. You say we just can't simply ignore that anymore. This is going to have to happen.
Sure. I mean, this is a very tough challenge for us. Perhaps not quite as bad as we expected, but nevertheless very tough, and we shouldn't underestimate that. No government in the world would try to address this purely through cuts in spending. We have to look at also at raising revenue, and we can do this in a socially just way. Water charges is something we have deferred for many years. It costs us around £200 million every year to do that. If we continue to defer water charges, that means having to find cuts of a further 200 million, and cuts actually affect those who are most vulnerable in society the most. Water charges should be based upon people's ability to pay, so it can actually be a progressive measure.
One of the fears, I suppose, Mitchell McLaughlin, is that the fears of the watching public is that members of the executive are going to go in and they're all going to fight for their own departments and not worry so much about someone else's department. Is that the way it's going to go, which is kind of the way it has gone up till now?
Well, I hope not. That's all I can say. We'll see. We have proposed that the Assembly is recalled next week. We'll hear a statement from Sammy Wilson, the Finance Minister. I would expect that the circumstances we find ourselves in would require the parties to come back positively to the information that Sammy Wilson gives us, with propositions, with suggestions, with ideas. I mean, we have the background to this, and it's an important background, is that Vodafone companies, read the Independent, the London edition of the Independent today. They owe £6 billion tax. This government wrote that off. Now, that's equivalent to the welfare cuts that they announced yesterday. That's the nature of the government we are dealing with. Now, and I can understand that maybe David wants to be, supportive because of his relationship with the Tory party, and I can understand how Stephen's sister party...
Never miss a chance, do they? Never miss a chance, so they're low blow.
They're part of the code. Well, it's not...
I understand.
And I do suggest that...
the figures are what the figures are, I mean.
Well, the figures are what the figures are. If we hear proposals...
The DUP accepted a promise from the Tory government of flexibility in and around the Northern Ireland budget. Well, what was that level of flexibility?
Yeah. Well, don't throw in the towel just yet.
Maybe Mitchell or
no, don't throw in the towel just yet, and I would urge the SDLP
we have never thrown in the towel.
Okay. Well, what I'm suggesting we can do, and I do look forward to hearing the suggestions of the other parties. We can, I think, meet some of this deficit out of our own efforts through efficiencies and through revenue generating proposals. We've put our ideas out,
but not water charges.
No, and we've explained our rationale. Yeah. So we will listen to the arguments of others, and I promise we will listen to the arguments of others. But we believe we can defend that arrangement.
I think that the challenge is out there for us all, as I've said. But I think Mitchell has got to be absolutely open with this. I want an assurance from the Sinn Féin ministers that they're actually going to go back into the executive, that they're going to be positive tomorrow at its meeting, and you're really not on a wrecking crusade here. What Jerry Adams has been saying this morning appears to me that you're setting your stall out, and you yourself said it on radio this morning, that this place might collapse. For goodness sake, we have got to show confidence to the people. We've got to show leadership. And you're talking this morning on radio about collapsing.
Instability was the word, I think.
No, collapsing is the word I heard. Collapsing is the word I heard.
Well, we've got to...
I'll come to you in 1 second.
We have
answer that point.
What we've got to do is give the assurances.
Okay,
I will give him an absolute guarantee.
I
will give you an absolute guarantee that the Sinn Féin ministers will enter those discussions, that executive tomorrow, with a positive agenda. We will not support, and it's important to say this, a single item agenda which is discussing cuts.
Well, there you are. There you are. I mean, what are you going to do then?
How are your ministers going to respond to that?
Well, as bad and all as this is, and it is devastating, we are going to have to deal with it. That's what people voted for. They voted for us to go up there into Stormont and take difficult decisions. Now, this is an extremely difficult set of circumstances that we're facing, but they want to see maturity. They want to see rational ideas and thoughts coming forward from their politicians. They don't want to see bickering and fighting and grandstanding or fighting for sort of narrow party political objectives. They want to see us pulling together, because people out there, people watching this show this evening, have gone through their own comprehensive spending review. They've had to take the tough decisions themselves on the basis of maybe having lost a job or having their home go into negative equity. They've taken tough decisions. They've made their own cutbacks.
All right.
Now they want to see.
We've heard that Sinn Féin has
see.
made its own proposals. The SDLP is making proposals.
We haven't got the guarantee.
Are the DUP going into it with the agenda of just how best to manage what has been imposed upon us?
We are going to have to make the best of a very bad job. But within that, we are going to have to protect the economy and ensure that we can encourage economic growth, even in the face of cuts to the construction or the capital budget, which is going to devastate construction. And we have to also work at protecting vulnerable people at the same time. Those are, I think, the objectives that any party here should be able to subscribe to and work towards.
But how? I mean, that's what everyone would agree to. How do you do that specifically? Give me one specific thing you would do.
Well, I don't think anything should be off the table in terms of how we look. And we should be looking at all of our public services, what we're delivering, whether we should be delivering them or not. Yeah, and we should be everything should be up for discussion.
You're very patient,
that's the way to do
Kelly.
it.
Come in. Yes, go ahead.
Well, I'd be interested to hear in what the tax measures that MITCHEL is going to propose. But you know, there are a number of areas in which we could actually work together collegiately. And the construction industry is already devastated. There's already been 21,000 jobs lost, you know, so we need to actually look at how the construction industry can lift not only the jobs across all of those trades that are associated with construction, but all of the services that are
But how do you think
provided.
that might happen with the capital expenditure budget being cut to ribbons and some 40% down?
Well, we have to look at what's the best value in terms of, I mean, is it best to build the school? Is it best to build the hospital? What is the best way to spend the money that we have? And I think we do need agreement, you know, around the table. We do need grown-up politics. And there are areas that we could look at in terms of fat in the system. You know, there are a lot of high earners at the very top of the civil service. That needs to be looked at. That really does need to be looked at urgently.
Yes, but that might save a few hundred thousand here or there, not billions and billions. Stephen Farrary.
Yes, I mean, a number of things we can do. I mean, specifically in terms of the capital budget, it is possible for us to shift some money from the current budget into capital to make up some
Because it's a block grant,
yes,
which we have total control of.
We can do that. Secondly, we could look to developing the green economy as a way of actually dealing with the shortfall in construction. I mean, there's massive opportunities in terms of retrofitting our homes, which are very inefficient in public sector buildings and businesses. That can get people to work very quickly, and also it's good for the environment and also keeps people's bills down. Also this week we've had the debate about shared education. I mean, investing in a shared future is a very good way of saving money, as the Alliance Party has stressed on many
time again. David McNary.
Look, tomorrow the executive has got to be crystal clear. The headlines are 4 billion cuts. Last week we were talking about 2 billion. Need to
Well, it just depends how you account it, really, doesn't it? That is confusing.
We actually need to do that accounting for the public so that they understand it. We can understand it, but we need to do that accounting. The other thing is now this row, this spat that's going on between the Secretary of State and the two First Ministers regarding the 18 billion.
Yes.
We need to clarify that. I understand that there will be a commitment from the government today or tomorrow to the First Minister saying the 18 billion's intact.
Now, a commitment made on this programme last week.
The commitment, I understand that'll be honoured. I understand that what we...
The question is when.
It could come too late. It could come too late and cripple our construction industry. That's the problem.
What we've got to go through is and say, did somebody somehow misunderstand what was said at St Andrews? Because that commitment that was given there, did it involve other elements? And are these other elements now the things that are totally in control of the executive to ask for, to manage? And I think that's what we've got to do. Give some leadership to the people and say, look, we're going to manage this.
The problem has been Sinn Féin and the DUP have held those talks and excluded other parties. We all need to be around the one table and all need to be putting our heads together collectively to look out for the people who need our help the most.
No, that's right. Other parties were there as well. I can remember seeing them there, and this was a commitment.
Again, that's history. That's history. This is 2010.
But this was a commitment on this particular point that David raises about the capital promise. This was raised not in private meetings, not in secret. It was brought into the public by the then Prime Minister on the steps of Downing Street and then later in the House of Commons as well.
Public commitment. You're not going to be embarrassed when the government explain it.
And David, your old friend, David.
If you're going to be embarrassed when the government explain it.
You have a chance to make your point.
David, your old friend Owen Patterson sat in the studio last week and told us that it was secured. He stands alongside the Chancellor yesterday and cheers as he cuts the capital budget by 40% over the next 3 years.
That's a different budget. That's out of a different pocket.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. 40% off our capital budget for the next 3 years.
And what we can't afford to do is slow, and then all of a sudden expect the construction industry to spend a lot of money in the final 2 years.
Does this need
It'll not
Mitchell
be there.
McLaughlin
It'll
to
not be
be
there to do it.
organised, to be done, to have whatever you have? Does it need to be in place by January?
Yes.
Of course it
budget needs
does.
to be
Yeah,
in place.
whatever we are going
So
to
long as
be
they
able
don't
to
wreck
do
the budget.
needs
Let 'em
to be
speak.
whatever we are able to do by January in terms of the budget has to be able to answer the question that David is posing, and we will demonstrate that we are there with a constructive purpose.
Great.
But we are not there, and I mean, I'm a bit worried about what I heard from the SDLP.
Quickly, if you
we
can,
are not
please.
there to implement cuts on behalf
Well,
of
what are
the poor.
savings? You're the one
We're not
that
there to
Doris
do
tax
it.
Kelly,
raising
gentlemen,
powers.
thank you all
What are your
very
tax
much
raising
indeed.
powers?